Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Interwar Years Lecture, Part 3. We talked about the Great Depression and we talked about the Great Depression and different social safety nets that they put in place yesterday to counteract the bust effects of capitalism, which during that time period were very, very serious and intense because there were no social safety nets. We also talked about the beginnings of the Russian Revolution. And I have some pictures of people for you now. So this is the Romanovs. In the center there is Tsar Nicholas II, and then his wife is the one wearing the crown and looking distinctly older than the other ones, Tsar Alexandria. And then the little boy is his heir apparent, Alexei. He was a very tragic sort, had hemophilia. That's the disease where you can't, your blood doesn't clot, and so you just bleed and bleed and bleed. It is a bad situation. Here is Lenin. Vladimir Lenin, not John. Dapper looking fellow. He died of complications arising from a stroke. Very sad. Here's Trotsky. Trotsky was murdered with an ice axe. That's a good story. By this gentleman. Oh, what a handsome young man. Oh, wait, it's Stalin. Never mind. Yeah, Stalin sent an assassin after Trotsky in Mexico in like 1962 or something like that. The dude whacked him on the head with an ice axe. Didn't manage to kill him. Only hurt himself. Trotsky wanted him kept alive for questioning, and Trotsky died like the next day. Anyways, and here's Lenin today. Smells like fresh Lenin. He's still dead, but he is on display. Fun, fun, fun. All right, so after the Russian Revolution, they create, and by they, I mean specifically Vladimir Lenin and his government, create the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the USSR. First things first, they have to get out of World War I. So they make a treaty with Germany. And they have the pointy helmet. That's a great pointy helmet. And then here's Russia. They have big mustaches. Beard tax. And Russia says, hey, yo, we'd like to be out of World War I. And Germany says, well, what are you going to give me to let you go? We've been fighting for like 4 years. What are you even talking about? And Russia is like, how about Estonia? And Estonia's over here going, wait. Estonia? No! Please keep in mind that a lot of these areas have no control over themselves because they have no industry, they have no political power, they have no military, they have no way to defend themselves. And so places like Germany and Russia are just trading places like Estonia because Estonia has nothing and they can't defend themselves. So Russia gives Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, well, part of Belarus, and Ukraine over to Germany. But this actually is difficult because Estonia, Latvia, Finland, Lithuania, Belarus, and Ukraine are really large amounts of territories and aren't thrilled to have Germany taking over them, so Germany has to invest a lot of manpower into occupying those new territories. So then Russia is free to leave to go address what's going on back home, which is a civil war. We have two sides. We have the Red Army, which is, unsurprisingly, the communists, because, you know, we tend to associate communism in the color red. And then we have the White Army, and the White Army is this weird mishmash of everybody else. So we have a bunch of, and Lenin. Lenin. So over here in the White Army, we have a bunch of pro-monarchists. We have a bunch of just people, the provisional government is over here, set up by Alexander Kerensky. We have them over here. We just have a whole bunch of people who are anti-Bolshevik, and again, the communists are called the Bolsheviks. So the White Army fellows are called Mensheviks. And then we also have troops from Great Britain, from America, from Japan, who all have vested interests in making sure that the communists don't win. Now, Tragically for the White Army, the Communists do win. Hooray! And it's so exciting for the Communists and not so much the White Army, turns out. Lenin decrees, because he wins, Lenin decrees that he is going to redistribute land, because remember that was something that the provisional government did not want to do. And he also wants to nationalize industry. Now, this does not sit well with landowning peasants, and hence the Civil War kind of a thing. I forgot to start my timer, so I'm going to start it at 11 minutes, and if we go a little short, that's totally okay. Okay, so here's a map. You can see that the red area is the ceded area. They have a few areas that are supposed to be self-determined areas. Whatever. And then that little area in here with the dots is the areas to be evacuated by Germany. So it's not like Russia didn't get anything out of this. Here is, you can see the different flags. You can see America, France, can't see that one, and Japan, who are all parading through the city of Vladivostok to support the White Army. Remember that Vladivostok is the city over close to Korea? Yeah. Okay, so the Russian Civil War is pretty gnarly. The Bolsheviks are not good people. They took all of the grain from the peasants. Here's the grain. It's in a bundle, and the peasants are sad. And they're like, yay, communism. And these peasants are like, boo, starvation. 5 million people die in one of Stalin's famous grain seizing operations. This is grain. Creates a famine, 5 million people die. They suppress nationalist rebellions, so a whole bunch of people who are not ethnically Russian or not Slavic, or who, don't want to be part of the USSR get, not so great. And we have something called the Red Terror, where they execute strikers. No work until fair. They also execute lots of peasants and priests. Here's a peasant. Farms. And they kill anybody suspected of allying with the Romanovs or the White Army. I miss Tsar Nick. Ah. So tons of people are killed. They use the USSR's first secret police, or secret police, as I wrote in your PowerPoint. They're called the Cheka, and the Cheka end up getting covered up by the KGB. The KGB are still around today, and in fact, Vladimir Putin, the current Prime Minister of Russia, was a member of the KGB, which is terrifying. Despite all of this, the Bolsheviks still have tons of popular support because they're letting lower class men into officer and government roles, and most of the peasants are really tired with how things are going, so they're pretty okay with this. And the White Army kills lots of people too, let's not forget. But they're the only communist government for about 25 years. It's almost like everybody else is waiting to see how they do and see if they like what the Russians come up with. So here is a big banner that says "Death to the bourgeoisie and its lapdogs, long live the Red Terror." So there were plenty of people who were more than happy to kill others. Okay, so Lenin wasn't super great. He was an authoritarian leader, but when he dies, he's like, I'd like Trotsky to succeed me because he's not a total lunatic. Trotsky was the commander of the Red Army. Here's Trotsky. He has glasses and a big mustache. I'm not a total lunatic. Trotsky. But Stalin, who is pretty intense, all things considered, does not like Trotsky. Stalin is going to wear a cap. Here's Stalin's cap. And he has a mustache as well. I don't like, that's a terrible drawing of Stalin. I don't like Trotsky. So, Stalin is not an idiot. He is an authoritarian dictator, but he is not an idiot. So, he maneuvers the removal of Trotsky. It's not like he just assassinates him immediately or makes him disappear or anything. First off, he engenders distrust and disrespect of him from other prominent party members. So we have a whole bunch of other communists who are like, I don't like Trotsky either. Then he forces him into exile. So Trotsky goes to lots of different places, Turkey and Mexico specifically. And then Trotsky eventually is killed by an assassin sent by Stalin, but it takes a while. It takes several different assassins. And he is killed by an ice axe. An ice axe in the head. This is my ice axe. And he's killed. Bummer. So Stalin is the leader now, and he does want to promote industrialization and agriculture and to create a buffer zone in Eastern Europe. And so he creates the different USSRs so that it's not quite, there's something in between Russia proper and Germany. So here we have the Soviet Union as it looked in 1991. So you can see that we have Russia proper, but then we have all these other little bits and pieces in between Russia and the rest of everybody else. So, okay. So let's finish up with Stalin really quick. He is a totalitarian leader. There are no opposition parties. There's lots of censorship of the media, arts, education, only approved ways of thinking. And Stalin is also on the hunt for quote-unquote enemies. This is a really vague term, very similar to the Spanish Inquisition, that he can sort of fit anybody he wants into it. So a lot of people, he says, are corrupted by the bourgeoisie ideas, and he uses it to kill them and people who don't agree with him. He also kills a whole bunch of pre-revolutionary elites and stuff like that too. But lots of general, normal, everyday people get shoved into this because, hey, perfect excuse to get rid of your neighbor who makes you really annoyed. Or that dude who's trying to steal your girl. Just get him killed in the Great Purchase. So a lot of people are tried. He has a curly wig. He's a judge. We find, and he's sitting behind his big judgy thing. Here's his gavel. We find you guilty of being annoying. So they are sent. They are either executed immediately. Bleh. Bleh. Or they are sent to work camps called Gulags, which are terrible. And so they are sent to, here's a shovel, they are sent to work at the Gulags for the rest of their short, sad lives, where there's disease, and it's cold, and it's terrible. About 1 million people were executed immediately, and then about 4 to 5 million people were sent to the Gulags and usually just died in the Gulags. Okay, so during this time period as well, Stalin is also collectivizing agriculture, which means that he is smooshing people onto big farms. So used to be, we have, here's a farm, there's a farm, here's a farm, everywhere's a farm. Old MacDonald had a farm. That's Stalin collectivized. So we have all these different little farms. And now Stalin is taking over all of them, and he is making them into a single collective farm. But the people who were owning some of these farms and were rich were really upset about it. Supposedly, if you made a collective farm, it's more effective and better able to utilize modern equipment. But Stalin also was like, we shouldn't have people who are too rich. So they had these really rich peasants. He has a monocle, and a mustache, and a top hat. It's very tall. So he had these rich peasants, I say, I'm a rich peasant, and they were called kulaks, not to be confused with gulags. And Stalin would either single them out and exclude them from the collective farms, or, like Stalin enjoyed doing, just kill them. Or sometimes he would deport them, in which case they went to the gulags, so the kulaks go to the gulags. and they die of malnutrition, overwork, disease, etc. Also, the officials who enforced collectivization were distrusted, excuse me, I'm having trouble conjugating my verbs today. And then a lot of times, too, it didn't really work out as well as they had hoped. So we have 5 million people die because of famines. And we also had, no protections for the countryside either. So the countryside is wildly exploited for the industrial purposes of the cities. And this means that most peasants are not having a good time. So here we can see the 3 different levels of Russian peasants. The topmost one is really, really peasanty peasants. The middle one is middle-class peasants. And then the bottom one is rich peasants. And you can distinctly see the improvement in quality of homes and possessions and stuff like that. 6 million perish in Soviet famine. Peasants' crops seized. They and their animals starve. Yup. And then here is an map of the areas of the famines. You will notice that Ukraine is particularly hard hit. This is because Ukraine is known as the breadbasket of Europe. They make all the grain, and so Stalin is like, oh, hello, let me just take all the grain from you. Oh, okay. How do they industrialize? Well, how they industrialize is that the state owns everything, and the Communist Party is everywhere. Stalin also creates several 5-year plans, and they prioritize heavy industry and basically force everybody to work and force everybody to do everything. Now, when you are forcing people to work, here's Stalin. Go to work, or I kill you. There's his pointy finger. Nobody is unemployed, but they are usually still sad. These are sad faces. Watch them go. Watch them go. They're very sad. His legs are sad. And they have to go off to work in the factories and heavy industry, and things are terrible, and they're belching out smoke, and it's a factory. Belch smoke, factory. So things are pretty terrible, even though, things are great because they're putting out huge amounts of products, everybody is working, it's so great, except you're being forced to work and it's pretty terrible. And there are no protections for workers or anything like that. Having said that, this industrial society allows them to fend off the Nazis. And they do have some other not terrible things. They have high literacy rates and increased educational opportunities, which means more social mobility. I highly recommend the song There's a Rumor in St. Petersburg from the not Disney animated cartoon movie Anastasia. The song starts out, St. Petersburg is gloomy, St. Petersburg is bleak, my underwear has been frozen standing here all week. Since the revolution, our lives have been so gray. Stasia. I can't spell. That Russian babe, Anastasia. But it actually does give you, believe it or not, a good glimpse into what life was like in Stalinist and Leninist Russia. All right, we're going to go ahead and stop there. Hope you enjoyed all of these terrible drawings of sad Russian peasants.